Hello, beautiful community. It is my understanding that you want me to say something about how the Trump-Zelensky relationship is evolving, because it looks like they're getting on better now. What are the political implications of this? Are they really getting on better? What has and what hasn't changed? And what I've done for us is I have written a 3-part short piece to rapidly get us into the heart of my reflections on it. The first bit is going to be about what has changed for Trump with Zelensky and what hasn't in his mind. The second bit is going to be about a particular way Zelensky has grown. And the third bit is just going to be 3 political takeaways for us from the current situation. I'm going to read this, if that's okay, and just make some comments along the way. If you want a copy of this, I'm going to put this on Substack. Everything that appears on my Substack is free to read. All right, beautiful community, let's rock and roll. The first thing I want to say is that Trump still dislikes Zelensky, but he now thinks that Zelensky is real, whereas before he didn't. So let's see what I've written about that. Trump still dislikes Zelensky. He doesn't like his raspy voice. He doesn't like his clothes. He thinks Zelensky looks homeless and therefore unhygienic. And the more fixation-oriented bits of Trump's personality are very, 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 very big on cleanliness and hygiene. And that's partly why Trump struggles with certain kinds of change in his life, like having a different kind of spoon in a new place and so on. So there's something viscerally unhygienic there for Trump, and that's still present. And that's how he'd talk about Zelensky behind his back in private. He also doesn't like that Zelensky is short. Putin's height, of course, doesn't bother him because he idealizes him. Trump has a fantasy about Putin as an exalted object and bathes in the glow of that exalted object. I need to correct what I've written there. But what has changed is that Trump now sees Zelensky as real, more than he did before. In the past, Zelensky didn't meet Trump's needs for narcissistic supply, and therefore for Trump he didn't exist. For, let's be clear, most narcissists, the world breaks into 2 categories. People who meet your narcissistic supply and are real, are properly on your radar, and all the other people who are there, you've got to deal with them, but there's a sense in which they aren't part of the world that really matters to you. And it's in that sense that Zelensky didn't exist for Trump. But as Zelensky gains geopolitical cards, and we've seen a lot of memes about Zelensky's cards recently, he becomes a kind of ambiguous source of narcissistic supply for Trump. He gets something from him, but he also doesn't get as much as he gets from people who he really idealizes, like Mr. Putin. So now Zelensky is real for Trump, and I think that is a change. Another bit, the second part of what I've written for us, is about how Zelensky has grown. Before entering politics, Zelensky had a fantasy that talking to people face to face could change the world. In his previous career, this fantasy gave him the confidence to be spontaneous on stage. In politics, it ran aground. This fantasy ran aground. In 2019, Zelensky discovered that being authentic face-to-face could have no impact on the tyrant in the Kremlin. And in 2025, he brought the same expectation to the Oval Office, and then got ambushed by Trump and Vance. As we recall, in fact, it was an ambush that was triggered by Vance because Vance triggered Trump's sense of sadistic narcissistic supply. Vance sort of opened the gates for Trump to be mean to Zelensky and enjoy being seen to be mean to someone, as though one's master of that somebody else's destiny. Really disgusting, and profoundly embarrassing behavior for America by Vance and Trump, but in my view, initiated by Vance. In 2026, he's been disabused of this fantasy. He now thinks that authentic engagement needs tactics to be part of a theory of change. And this, together with practice and advice from other Western leaders, helps him handle Trump better. You could sort of understand this thing that Zelensky still had. It's a kind of a youthful arrogance where you think, once I'm present in the room and it gets properly face to face, I just have the confidence I can shift things a little bit, things can move. And that worked for Zelensky on stage, and it's quite an understandable feeling, right, relative to his career. He needed very, very high confidence about this. Yes, I can shape this situation. Once I'm properly there, once I'm making contact with the audience from the stage, I can shape this thing, right? I've got it. It's going to be okay. I can transform the audience's state. And he kept bringing that into politics. And there was this fantasy that once you get with somebody properly one-on-one, and you really, really look face to face, you can kind of get past a lot of the political bullshit that's halting, your way to a compromise. And that was a bit naive, right? That's not quite how politics works. You need that presence and that sort of authentic vividness face to face, but it's got to be part of a tactical approach to how you're handling the political interlocutor you're dealing with. Now, let's do a little bit of political takeaways. It'd be unsatisfying to leave this post without a bit of politics. So here are 3 schematic bits of political analysis. Number 1, Trump and Zelensky have now had their most cordial bilateral meetings. But Trump is not pivoting toward Ukraine. He simply thinks it is now unrealistic to force Ukraine into a pro-Russian peace. So he was trying to do, and he's not trying to do it anymore. He could start trying to do it again in a year, but he's not trying to do it now. He sees that it's unrealistic. Trump now sees Zelensky as having more cards. B, or 2, Zelensky has pressed on Trump that Russia credibly helps Iran target US bases. Zelensky's intent is, as it has always been, to globalize Ukraine's war against Russia and draw Western powers more deeply into it. In this instance, it won't work, because Trump finds Russian and Chinese support for Iran reasonable. Trump thinks if the US is helping Ukraine strike Russia, why wouldn't Russia help Iran strike US bases? Well, what's the problem here? And C, Putin. What's happening with Putin when he sees that Trump and Zelensky have got on a bit better? Putin, meanwhile, is sulking in a bowl of grievance. He misunderstood his discussions with Trump, having confused 2 things around the Alaska period. First, Trump's openness to Putin grabbing all of the Donbass if Putin could force this on Ukraine. And 2, a commitment from Trump to force Ukraine into surrendering all of the Donbass. In Putin's mind, which exaggerates US hold over Ukraine's sovereignty, he and Trump were committed to the second. Hey, Mr. Trump, it looks like you're going to force Ukraine into giving me all of the Donbass. Isn't that what we discussed? Whereas in fact, Trump was only committed to the first. Trump was saying, well, if you want all of the Donbass, press in the war, make Ukraine surrender it. And if you can do that, then great, good luck to you, and we'll have a deal. And Putin confused these 2 positions because of the way he relates to negotiations and because of the way he sees American sovereignty as preeminent over Europe and also over Ukraine. And so, in Putin's mind, he exaggerates the US hold over Ukraine's sovereignty. He and Trump were committed to the second in Putin's mind. And Trump was only committed to the first. And so again, for the 17th time, Trump feels the conniving West has betrayed him. And it's worth saying a word about that, because actually, if you think about Putin's messaging and Putin's propaganda, and you actually reflect on it properly, not like the Russian population does, which is to hear it as a kind of background, then what Putin's propaganda actually amounts to is an itinerary of unbelievable failures on his part. Because his propaganda says, the West got us again, and then they got us again, and then they promised that, and they didn't give it, and then they said they didn't do this, and then they went back with what they said. It's literally, they promised this to Gorbachev, and then they didn't do it. They promised this to me, and then they didn't do it. And they said they wouldn't expand NATO, and then they did, and then they did. They said they wouldn't, they did a bit more. And then they caused me to start a war, which is what he said the other day. And he believes it because he thinks that he's in a defensive war. And so, and then they tricked me, and now we've got fires all over the country, and all of these warehouses are burning down, and one of our biggest companies is going down, and we've got a fuel crisis, and it's all the work of the mean West. But the point is, hang on, Mr. Putin, aren't you meant to be a strong leader who can stop the West from tricking you? And if so, where is any of that? Your own propaganda says that the West has tricked and betrayed and outmaneuvered you 77 times in a row. What kind of propaganda is that? I mean, it just says that every time you fail to stop the West from doing something you wanted them to be stopped from doing, and they got you, and then you cry. And then they keep getting you, and then you keep crying. What kind of strong leader is it who keeps losing constantly and crying all the time? That is actually Putin's propaganda, but it takes an extra level of reflection to realize that that's actually what's being communicated. Talk very soon. Lots of love, beautiful community.